The desperate plan emerges. The world had never seen anything like this before. The aliens had come not just with advanced technology, but with a deep understanding of humanity's weaknesses. They knew how to strike at the heart of the human spirit, how to cripple an entire planet with fear. Earth had faced many threats in its history, but nothing prepared them for the terror the aliens had unleashed. The weapons they wielded were not just physical, they targeted the very essence of what made humans human. The first attack was swift and brutal. Massive ships appeared in the sky, and within hours, the cities of Earth were under siege. But it wasn't just the bombs, lasers, or missiles that did the most damage. It was a strange new weapon, something humanity had never seen before. The weapon emitted pulses of energy that triggered overwhelming emotions of fear and panic. The attacks weren't aimed at destroying buildings or infrastructure. They were designed to tear apart the human psyche. Soldiers, once strong and fearless, fell to their knees, crippled by visions of their deepest fears. Panic spread through cities like wildfire. People who had never been afraid of anything in their lives now cowered in terror as the weapon fed off their most vulnerable moments. Earth was not just under attack by an alien force. It was under attack by something that understood human nature on a level that was terrifying. But Earth's military was not ready to give up. Even though the aliens' weapon was devastating, the generals and commanders knew that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to adapt. And adapt they would. But how? The world's leaders gathered in secret, far from the chaos of the front lines. In a dark, underground command center, they debated what to do next. They couldn't just sit back and let the aliens win. Humanity had always been a species that fought for survival, and this was no different. But what could they do against a weapon that attacked their very minds? The scientists and military strategists worked around the clock, trying to find a solution. They studied the alien weapon, analyzing its effects on both the soldiers and civilians. They discovered that the weapon didn't just attack the body, it attacked the mind, using frequency waves to disrupt brain patterns. It caused fear to spread like a virus, infecting anyone within range. The weapon was nearly perfect, exploiting the one thing humanity couldn't easily fight back against: fear itself. But that was the breakthrough they needed. If fear was the weapon's power, then fear could also be its weakness. The key was not to fight the weapon head-on, but to turn its own strength against it. The military needed to find a way to neutralize the fear it caused, and in turn, stop the alien weapon from doing any more damage. But how could they do that when they didn't fully understand the weapon's inner workings? It was then that one of the scientists, Dr. Elisa Miller, proposed a daring idea. What if we could train our soldiers to resist the fear? She asked. What if we could prepare them mentally, so the weapon wouldn't have any effect? At first, the idea seemed impossible. How could anyone train themselves to resist something as overwhelming as pure fear? But then Dr. Miller explained her theory. The human brain is more powerful than we give it credit for. If we can teach our soldiers to control their thoughts, to face their fears head-on, they might be able to block out the effects of the weapon. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one they had. The generals immediately saw the potential, but they knew it would take time. The soldiers would need rigorous mental training, far beyond what any soldier had ever experienced before. They would need to confront their deepest, darkest fears and learn how to control their minds in the face of unimaginable terror. The plan was set into motion immediately. Military camps were converted into psychological training centers. Soldiers who had never faced anything beyond traditional combat now faced something far more difficult: the challenge of overcoming fear itself. The training was grueling. Soldiers were forced to confront their worst nightmares, whether it was drowning, being trapped in a burning building, or losing loved ones. They were forced to relive these fears over and over again until they could no longer be overwhelmed by them. The training was not just physical. It was mental, emotional, and spiritual. The soldiers were taught how to meditate, how to clear their minds, and how to control their breathing. They were taught how to focus on the present moment, and not let fear dictate their actions. The hope was that, if they could control their minds, they could survive the alien weapons' effects. But it wasn't just the soldiers who needed to be prepared. The scientists worked on developing new technology to help amplify the mental conditioning. They created devices that helped enhance the soldiers' focus, blocking out external distractions. They designed specialized helmets that protected the brain from the alien weapons' frequency waves, giving the soldiers an added layer of defense. As the soldiers trained, they began to notice changes within themselves. They grew stronger, both physically and mentally. They no longer feared the alien weapon. They had learned to control it, to push back against the fear it caused. The once crumbling soldiers were now the most prepared warriors on the planet. The plan had begun. Earth's military wasn't just going to survive. They were going to fight back. The aliens had thought they could break humanity with fear, but they had underestimated the human spirit. It wasn't the weapon that would win. It would be humanity's ability to adapt, to learn, and to survive. The real battle was just beginning. The mysterious weapon. The alien attack had shaken humanity to its core. But as the weeks passed, the Earth's military began to understand something crucial. There was more to the alien weapon than just its ability to induce fear. As the scientists and engineers worked tirelessly, they discovered something unexpected. The weapon wasn't just a mind control device. It was a complex system that targeted the human brain in a way no weapon ever had before. The weapon, they realized, worked by sending out waves of energy that disrupted the brain's natural rhythms. These waves interfered with the brain's electrical signals, heightening the parts responsible for fear and anxiety, while shutting down the higher cognitive functions necessary for problem-solving and decision-making. Essentially, the weapon turned its victims into overwhelmed, paralyzed beings, unable to fight, think, or act. It was not just a weapon of destruction. It was a weapon that turned the mind into an enemy of the body. At first, humanity had no clue how to combat such a thing. After all, how could you fight something that didn't target your body, but your mind? With traditional weapons like guns or bombs, Earth's soldiers stood a chance. But this was something completely different. It wasn't about technology or firepower. It was about mental fortitude. In response, the military turned to its best minds. Dr. Elisa Miller and her team of neuroscientists, along with military strategists, worked day and night to reverse engineer the alien weapon. They needed to understand it completely, how it worked, why it affected humans the way it did, and how they could counteract it. The weapon, they discovered, used a frequency that humans were extremely sensitive to. This frequency was linked to deep-rooted fears and instincts that had evolved over thousands of years. For example, the fear of darkness, isolation, and danger. All feelings that could trigger panic and disarray. The weapon amplified these emotions, overwhelming the brain's ability to process and react. Once the human brain entered that heightened state of fear, it became completely vulnerable. However, in the chaos of the initial attack, something unexpected happened. A few humans, unexplainably, resisted the weapon. A handful of soldiers reported feeling nothing when the weapon was activated. These individuals were immune to its effects. The military and scientists were baffled at first, but they quickly realized that this resistance could be the key. Dr. Miller hypothesized that these soldiers had a rare neurological condition or mental trait that made them immune to the fear response. It was a rare occurrence, maybe 1 in 1,000, but it gave them hope. If they could study these individuals, they might be able to unlock the key to neutralizing the weapon for everyone. Soon, a small group of immune soldiers was selected and placed under intense observation. They were tested in various simulated environments where the alien weapon was deployed. To the military's amazement, these soldiers showed no signs of fear at all. They acted calmly and decisively, even in the face of the terrifying emotional triggers set off by the weapon. While this was encouraging, the military couldn't rely on the hope that more soldiers would be born with this unique resistance. They needed a way to mass-produce immunity, to train an entire army that could stand firm against the alien weapon. And so, the race to replicate this immunity began. The solution, they decided, would lie in rewiring the human brain. While it was a dangerous and untested method, it was the only option left. The military began developing an experimental procedure designed to increase the brain's resistance to fear. It wasn't a quick fix. It would require years of training and conditioning. But if it worked, it would provide humanity with a fighting chance. Dr. Miller's team began working with the best psychologists, neuroscientists, and military trainers in the world. They developed an intricate process that involved exposing soldiers to controlled doses of fear, using virtual reality simulations, psychological conditioning, and advanced brainwave modulation technology. Soldiers would experience terrifying scenarios designed to trigger their deepest fears, but they would be taught how to confront and control those fears before they could spiral out of control. It wasn't just about teaching soldiers how to face fear. It was about teaching them to see fear as a tool. If fear could overwhelm, it could also be controlled. The military's new philosophy was simple. Instead of running from fear, they would learn to master it. The training was grueling. Soldiers were pushed to their mental and emotional limits. They were subjected to simulated disasters, dangerous environments, and intense fear-inducing situations, all while being taught to remain calm and focused. Some soldiers cracked under the pressure, unable to face their own nightmares. But for others, something incredible happened. Over time, they began to see fear as nothing more than a passing emotion, a temporary obstacle that could be controlled. Despite the difficulty of the process, progress was being made. Earth's military was learning how to resist the alien weapon, one soldier at a time. The scientists were working tirelessly to develop devices and brainwave inhibitors that would further enhance the soldiers' resistance. Soon, they began to test these techniques on larger groups, gradually introducing the technology to soldiers across the world. By the time the aliens launched their next wave of attacks, Earth's soldiers were not the same. They were more than soldiers. They were mentally fortified warriors, ready to stand against a weapon that once threatened to crush humanity. But the aliens weren't going to make it easy. They weren't just going to sit back and let Earth's resistance grow. They knew that humanity was adapting, and they would respond. The real battle was about to begin, and humanity was preparing itself for the fight of its life. The desperate plan takes shape. As the weeks passed, humanity's resolve grew stronger. Earth's military was no longer simply surviving the alien weapon. They were preparing to fight back. The training had begun to show results. Soldiers who had once been paralyzed by the weapon's terrifying effects were now learning to master their fear. But despite the progress, the military knew that it was not enough to rely solely on human strength. They needed something more, something that could turn the tide of war in their favor. In the heart of the Earth's command center, the high-ranking officers and scientists gathered. The alien weapon had proved to be more than just an enemy. It had become the key to humanity's survival. The weapon's power over the mind had given the humans an opportunity to fight back by exploiting its weaknesses, but they still had much to learn. Dr. Elisa Miller, the brilliant neuroscientist who had proposed the initial theory about fear, stood before the gathered officials, outlining the next phase of the plan. The weapon feeds off fear, she explained. But what if we could manipulate that fear to our advantage? Her words caught the attention of everyone in the room. The concept of using fear against the weapon was something that hadn't been fully explored. Until now, fear had been seen as something that needed to be eliminated. But what if humanity could use it as a weapon of their own? The plan, as Dr. Miller suggested, would involve harnessing the very emotions the weapon triggered. They would train soldiers not just to resist the weapon, but to channel their fear into energy that could fuel their strength and determination. It sounded like a gamble, but it was their best chance. The scientists began to work on modifying the training protocols, incorporating new methods that would teach soldiers to control their fear in more profound ways. They needed to learn to access fear, not avoid it. Soldiers were taught to face their deepest fears head-on, using their emotional responses to their advantage rather than allowing them to control them. This new approach wasn't easy. It required soldiers to face traumas and anxieties they had buried deep inside. They had to confront their own minds, facing fears they hadn't even known existed. Some soldiers failed, their psyches breaking under the strain. But others began to thrive. They learned to use fear as a tool, not a weapon. Their bodies no longer froze at the sound of the alien weapon's pulses. Instead, they stood firm, focusing on their newfound strength and determination. The next stage of the plan involved combining this mental fortitude with the military's technology. The scientists were now working on modifying the alien weapon itself. They had captured one of the devices after the first wave of attacks and had begun to reverse engineer it. The weapon's frequency waves, which once caused panic and fear, could now be altered. They could use the same technology to disrupt the alien weapon's ability to amplify fear, rendering it ineffective. However, the process was complex, and the military knew that they were not yet ready to face the full force of the alien attack. They needed more time to perfect their countermeasures, but with the aliens launching additional waves of attacks, time was running out. Humanity had to move quickly. Dr. Miller and her team worked tirelessly, their efforts becoming more desperate with each passing day. They made rapid advancements, developing devices that could block the frequency waves and protect soldiers from the worst effects of the alien weapon. But there was still one more hurdle to overcome: time. The Earth's military knew that the next wave of alien attacks would be their biggest test. They had no choice but to put their new plans into action. As the soldiers continued their mental and physical training, they also began to prepare for the next battle. The focus was now on speed, coordination, and precision. The countermeasures were far from perfect, but they were their best chance at survival. The tension was palpable as the military forces assembled on the front lines. The soldiers, hardened by their mental conditioning, stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to face whatever came next. They had trained to face the alien weapon and its fear-inducing effects. Now, they would put their training to the ultimate test. The next battle would be different. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting back. The soldiers had learned to harness their fear, turning it into something powerful. And with the new technology they had developed, they now had a fighting chance to take down the aliens once and for all. But even as the military prepared for the upcoming battle, they knew one thing for certain: the aliens weren't going to make it easy. The weapon they had developed had been nearly flawless. It had the potential to bring entire civilizations to their knees. If humanity was going to win, they would need every ounce of strength, intelligence, and courage they had. The real test was just beginning. Training the troops. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and Earth's military had no time to waste. The soldiers had been through the most rigorous mental training imaginable. They had confronted their deepest fears, faced psychological horrors, and emerged stronger. They were no longer the same men and women who had stood frozen in terror when the alien weapon first struck. They had evolved. Now, the focus shifted from individual mental training to collective strategy. The military leaders understood that in order to defeat the alien weapon, they needed more than just strong soldiers. They needed unity, coordination, and a deep understanding of how to work as a cohesive force under the most intense pressure. If each soldier could control their fear, the entire army would be unstoppable. The soldiers were taken to new facilities, specially designed for combat training under extreme conditions. These training camps were unlike any Earth had ever seen. The environment was carefully constructed to simulate the real conditions of war, including the overwhelming presence of the alien weapon. The training exercises pushed the soldiers to their limits, mentally, physically, and emotionally. But each challenge was designed not to break them, but to mold them into an elite force capable of facing the unknown. The training was relentless. Soldiers were exposed to simulated fear scenarios, some designed to replicate the effects of the alien weapon, and others meant to push them past the limits of human endurance. They fought in darkness, in extreme cold, in sweltering heat. They were forced to overcome exhaustion, hunger, and isolation. But through it all, they were taught the same core principle: control. They learned to master their breathing, to slow their heart rates in moments of intense fear, to focus their minds even when their bodies screamed in protest. The idea was simple. Once the soldiers could overcome fear in the training environment, they would be ready to face anything in the field, including the alien weapon. Their minds had to become sharp, their reactions precise. There was no room for hesitation. Dr. Miller, who had been instrumental in developing the training program, watched the soldiers closely. She had seen the progress. Soldiers who had once been terrified by the mere thought of the weapon now stood tall, their faces determined. But she also saw the toll it was taking. The mental conditioning had its limits. Soldiers were pushed to the brink of their sanity. For some, the fear was too much to handle. They cracked, breaking down emotionally and mentally. These soldiers were removed from the program, but their failure became a lesson for the others. Fear was a real enemy, and it had to be faced with absolute control. The success stories, however, were astounding. Soldiers who had been deeply affected by the initial wave of alien attacks had transformed into warriors with iron wills. They had learned to accept fear as a part of their humanity and had found ways to push past it. They had turned fear from a weakness into their greatest strength. To complement the psychological training, advanced technology was introduced. The soldiers were fitted with neural enhancers that amplified their mental conditioning. These devices helped them focus and blocked out external distractions, including the alien weapon's frequency waves. They were equipped with helmets that could neutralize some of the weapon's effects, and body armor that provided additional protection against the alien weapon's direct attacks. But it wasn't just about surviving the alien weapon anymore. The soldiers had become a force unto themselves. They were taught new combat strategies, focusing on teamwork and rapid adaptation. They practiced complex maneuvers that would allow them to respond to any threat, no matter how unexpected. They learned how to use the terrain, the environment, and even their own fear to their advantage. One of the most important lessons they learned was to trust each other. Fear was a powerful force, but together, they could overcome it. The soldiers worked in teams, each one relying on the others for strength and support. They learned that the only way to defeat the aliens, and their fear-wielding weapon, was to fight as a unified force. Alone, they were vulnerable. But together, they were stronger than any fear. As the training intensified, so did the pressure. Earth's military knew that the time to face the alien threat was approaching fast. They had one chance to prove their worth, and they couldn't afford to fail. The commanders and trainers pushed the soldiers to the limit, testing their endurance, their control, and their ability to adapt under extreme circumstances. The soldiers, though exhausted, began to feel the effects of their training. They were no longer afraid of the alien weapon. They had learned to control their minds, to push back the fear and replace it with focus and strength. Some soldiers even began to find ways to counterattack in their minds. They visualized themselves defeating the weapon, envisioning the moment when they would face the aliens and take control of the battlefield. The final stage of the training was a live-fire exercise, where the soldiers would be put into real-world scenarios. They would face mock alien attacks, simulations that replicated the exact pressure and chaos they would experience on the battlefield. These exercises would test everything they had learned, from their mental conditioning to their physical skills. As the day of the final exercise arrived, the soldiers lined up, ready to face their biggest test. Their bodies were tired, their minds sharp. They had been through hell in training, but they knew it would all pay off. It was time to see if they could truly stand against the alien weapon, and more importantly, if they could defeat it. The exercise began with a simulated alien strike, and immediately, the soldiers felt the pulse of fear radiate from the mock weapon. The familiar wave of panic washed over them. But this time, it was different. Instead of freezing in terror, they stood their ground, their minds focused. The fear did not overwhelm them. They moved as one, each soldier working with his or her team, counteracting the weapon's effects with skill and precision. For the first time, Earth's military knew that they could win. They had trained their minds and bodies to face the impossible, and they were ready. The first counterattack. The time had finally come. After months of rigorous training, countless hours spent in simulations, and the development of new technology to counter the alien weapon, Earth's military was ready. The soldiers, once broken by fear, were now a force of precision and strength. They had learned to control their minds, to turn fear into an asset, and to fight back. The first true test was about to unfold. As the alien fleet descended upon Earth once more, the military braced itself. The aliens had launched wave after wave of attacks, and this time, the Earth forces would not just defend, they would retaliate. The alien weapon, still capable of inducing fear in human minds, was ready to be deployed again. But this time, things would be different. Earth's soldiers were prepared, their minds fortified, and their technology in place to neutralize the weapon's effects. The alien force believed it had humanity cornered, just as it had before, but they underestimated one thing: humans had adapted. As the alien weapon fired, releasing its waves of fear across the battlefield, the Earth soldiers stood firm. Instead of the panic and confusion that had crippled them before, they stood with unwavering resolve. The frequency waves of the alien weapon washed over them, but they had learned to control their minds. The soldiers felt the fear, the deep primal fear, but they refused to let it rule them. Instead of collapsing under the weight of terror, they pushed forward. The training they had undergone now kicked into full gear. Soldiers who had once frozen in place under the weight of overwhelming fear now moved with precision. They executed their combat maneuvers with fluidity and coordination, each unit working seamlessly together. The alien weapon's pulses, meant to sow panic, only fueled their determination. Commanders watched from their command posts, amazed at the transformation. The soldiers had not only resisted the fear, they had learned to fight through it. They were no longer the vulnerable humans who had stood helpless in the face of the weapon. They were warriors, ready to take back control of their planet. But the aliens were not to be taken lightly. They had anticipated that Earth's forces would eventually adapt. The aliens' next move was one that would push humanity to its limits. They unleashed a secondary weapon, one that not only amplified the fear waves, but also introduced new elements of mental manipulation. This new weapon didn't just create fear, it introduced confusion, hallucinations, and disorientation. Soldiers began to see visions of their worst nightmares, even as they tried to focus on the task at hand. It was a test like no other. But this time, Earth's forces had a secret weapon: teamwork. Soldiers had been trained to rely on one another, and now it was their greatest asset. When one soldier began to falter, others stepped in to help. They guided each other through the confusion, helping to block out the hallucinations and stay focused. The alien weapon tried to break them, but they stood firm, pushing through the mental fog together. Dr. Miller, watching the battlefield unfold on screens, felt a surge of pride. The soldiers had come so far. They had not only overcome the weapon's psychological attack, they had learned to adapt and fight back in ways no one had predicted. And it was working. Earth's military leaders had anticipated that this would be a difficult battle, but they had not expected the aliens to be so relentless. The new weapon was a formidable force, but humanity had something that the aliens didn't: a refusal to surrender. Even as the mental manipulation took its toll, Earth's soldiers fought on, pushing back with everything they had. As the battle wore on, the first major breakthrough came. Earth's forces, using their newfound mental strength and technological countermeasures, began to neutralize the effects of the alien weapon. They used a combination of brainwave modulation devices and their own mental discipline to counteract the alien frequencies. Slowly but surely, the alien weapon's influence began to wane. The soldiers' fear, once their greatest weakness, had become their greatest strength. And now, they were pushing the aliens back. The alien forces, stunned by this unexpected resistance, tried to adapt. But it was too late. Earth's military had learned to fight on their terms, not the aliens. The tables had turned, and the aliens were now on the defensive. Commanders on the ground gave the order for the counterattack. Earth's soldiers, fueled by their newfound strength and determination, launched a full-scale assault on the alien forces. With their minds and bodies in perfect synchronization, they advanced, pushing the aliens back inch by inch. The alien weapon, once thought to be invincible, was now useless. Its power over human fear had been broken, and in its place, humanity stood strong, a united front of soldiers who had learned to overcome fear and fight back with courage and intelligence. As the battle raged on, Earth's military forces advanced with unyielding determination. The first major victory was within their grasp. The aliens, unable to comprehend how humanity had turned the tables, were forced to retreat. But this retreat was not a sign of defeat. It was a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. For the first time in the war, humanity had gained the upper hand. Earth's soldiers had not only survived the alien weapon, they had learned to outsmart it, turning fear into a tool for victory. But this retreat was not a sign of defeat. It was a testament to the strength and resilience of the human spirit. For the first time in the war, humanity had gained the upper hand. Earth's soldiers had not only survived the alien weapon, they had learned to outsmart it, turning fear into a tool for victory. The battle was far from over, but humanity had proven one thing. No weapon, no matter how powerful, could break their will to survive. The turnaround. The battle was not over, but humanity had made its first major victory. Earth's military had proven that they were no longer at the mercy of the alien weapon. The aliens, once confident in their ability to break humanity through fear, were now faced with an unexpected adversary, a species that had not only survived their attacks, but had begun to fight back. Despite the success, Earth's forces knew the war was far from won. The aliens had not been defeated. They had only been pushed back. The soldiers were not deluded into thinking this would be easy. The aliens had advanced technology, and they would learn from their setbacks. The victory was a small step, but it had ignited a spark of hope. As Earth's military forces reorganized, their commanders and scientists worked around the clock to develop new tactics. They knew the aliens would come back stronger, more strategic. The aliens would not allow their weapon to fail again. But the key to their success now lay in one simple fact. The weapon was no longer the insurmountable force it once was. It could be fought and defeated. Dr. Elisa Miller and her team continued to study the alien weapon, searching for any further weaknesses. The initial breakthroughs were encouraging, but they knew they couldn't rely on the same methods indefinitely. The aliens would evolve their tactics, and Earth had to be ready to outpace them. The next few weeks were filled with intense research and development. Scientists worked to improve the neural enhancers they had used to counteract the alien weapon's fear-inducing effects. They modified the brainwave modulating technology to make it more efficient, allowing soldiers to maintain their mental control for longer periods of time. They also worked on improving the synchronization between the neural devices and the soldiers' minds, making the technology more seamless and less invasive. At the same time, the soldiers continued their training. They had learned to control their fear, but now they had to refine their skills in real combat situations. The alien weapon had not only been a psychological threat, but also a tactical one, designed to make soldiers hesitate and falter. The next step was to teach the soldiers to not only withstand the aliens' mental attacks, but to anticipate them. They trained in new, more advanced combat techniques designed specifically to counter the alien forces' strategies. It wasn't just about standing firm anymore. Now Earth's forces had to learn how to outsmart the aliens, to predict their moves, and to exploit their weaknesses. Every strategy they developed was designed to take full advantage of the alien weapon's limitations. But just as humanity was beginning to find its rhythm, the aliens launched their next attack. The aliens had regrouped and learned from their previous defeat. They had upgraded their weapon, making it more potent than ever before. This time, they had combined the fear-inducing capabilities of the original weapon with a new form of mental manipulation. It was designed to go deeper, to attack the very core of human emotions, memories, and thoughts. As the alien forces launched their next strike, the weapon was unleashed with a level of intensity humanity had never faced. Soldiers who had once stood unshaken in the face of fear now felt an overwhelming wave of confusion and panic. The new weapon didn't just induce fear, it made soldiers question everything around them. Their minds were clouded with doubt, and for a moment, Earth's forces began to falter. The first few minutes of the attack were critical. Earth's soldiers, who had been trained to resist the weapon, felt the familiar pulse of fear, but this time, it was different. The weapon had gone deeper, affecting memories, making them doubt their purpose, their mission, and their ability to win. The battlefield became a blur, soldiers struggling to separate reality from the aliens' manipulations. It was the most dangerous situation Earth had faced since the war began. Commanders scrambled to keep control, sending messages to their troops, reminding them of their training, urging them to stay focused. It was a battle not just for survival, but for the very sense of self. But even as the soldiers struggled, they remembered one thing. They had been trained to face this. They had learned that fear could be controlled. They had learned to trust their comrades, to rely on each other. The turning point came when one soldier, Captain Mark Thomas, stood tall amid the chaos. His mind, though clouded by doubt, was clear enough to remember his training. He reached out to his unit, rallying them with words of confidence and strength. "We've faced worse than this. We've faced the alien weapon and defeated it. We can do it again," he shouted. His words rang out across the battlefield, cutting through the fog of fear. Slowly, other soldiers began to regain their focus. The neural enhancers they wore, modified to handle the new alien frequencies, began to work their magic. The soldiers' training kicked in. Together, they fought back against the weapon, using their strength and unity to push through the disorienting effects of the alien attack. The battle raged on. But this time, the alien weapon had lost its grip. The soldiers were able to push through the mental fog and regroup. The alien forces, realizing that their weapon was no longer effective, began to retreat. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt. The new weapon had been a last-ditch effort to break Earth's will, but humanity had once again proven that it was not so easily defeated. As the aliens retreated, Earth's forces regained control of the battlefield. They had faced a new level of mental warfare and had come out victorious. The alien weapon, once thought to be a perfect tool of destruction, had been rendered useless against the resolve and ingenuity of humanity. Earth had not only survived, they had turned the tide. But the war was far from over. The aliens would surely regroup and try again. But now, Earth's military had the knowledge and the strength to keep up. They had turned the tables, and they weren't going to stop until the aliens were driven from their planet. The final assault. The tide had turned. Earth's military forces, though battered, stood victorious once again. The alien weapon, which had once seemed invincible, had been overcome time and time again. The soldiers' resilience, mental conditioning, and technological advancements had made them a force that the aliens had not anticipated. But while Earth's victory on the battlefield had been hard-won, there was still more to be done. The aliens had regrouped, and they were preparing for their final assault. The military knew that they couldn't afford to be complacent. The aliens had learned from every previous engagement, and their next attack would likely be their most dangerous. Earth's generals had only one option: launch a decisive counteroffensive to break the alien forces once and for all. The plan was simple yet ambitious. Earth's military would not only defend, they would go on the offensive, pushing the alien forces back to their homeworld. Earth would strike at the heart of the alien empire, crippling their ability to continue the war. This was a calculated risk. If the military failed, the aliens would launch a full-scale retaliation, and Earth would be forced into a war of attrition that could last for years. But the Earth forces were ready. They had prepared for this moment. The soldiers had become experts in their ability to resist the alien weapon, and their newly developed technology could now neutralize the fear-inducing waves with near-perfect efficiency. They had the strength, the strategy, and the will to win. The final assault began with a massive strike on the alien fleet that had been hovering near Earth. Humanity's forces, backed by their most advanced warships and weapons, launched a surprise attack. The aliens were caught off guard, their defenses unable to respond in time. But the aliens were quick to adapt. They retaliated with a fury, using all the resources they had left. They activated their most powerful version of the fear weapon, desperate to break Earth's forces once and for all. This time, the alien weapon unleashed a terrifying barrage of energy pulses. The frequency waves were designed to amplify all human fears: doubt, fear of loss, terror of the unknown. But Earth's soldiers had prepared for this. As the waves hit, they immediately activated their neural enhancers and mental conditioning. The soldiers, as they had been trained, locked their focus and stood firm. Instead of succumbing to fear, they fought through it, using their training and teamwork to remain in control. The battlefield was chaos. The alien weapon's influence was powerful, but Earth's military forces responded with precision. Soldiers moved as one unit, pushing forward with a sense of purpose that the aliens could not counter. As the weapon's pulse spread through the battlefield, humanity's soldiers began to adapt even faster. They used their fear not as a weakness, but as fuel for their determination. Every wave of alien fear strengthened their resolve to end the war once and for all. The soldiers pressed onward, advancing through enemy lines, targeting the alien ships and stations. The technology Earth had developed to counteract the fear weapon now worked in full force, blocking the aliens' attempts to sow confusion and doubt. Every countermeasure they had developed was deployed, weakening the alien forces as Earth's army pushed deeper into their defenses. On the ground, the human troops launched a final offensive, sweeping through alien strongholds with a level of coordination and speed that left the aliens reeling. Human commanders called out orders, guiding their troops through every twist and turn, using the terrain to their advantage. The aliens, despite their superior technology, could not match the raw determination and teamwork of Earth's soldiers. The final push came when Earth's forces located and targeted the alien command center, the heart of the alien war machine. The mission was clear: destroy it and cripple the entire alien fleet. The soldiers advanced, knowing that this final strike could be the key to ending the war for good. The alien weapon was no longer enough to stop them. As Earth's forces stormed the command center, they encountered fierce resistance from the aliens, who were determined to defend their last hope. But the humans had the upper hand. The aliens could not break their unity, their will to win. Soldiers who had once cowered in fear now stood tall, their minds clear and focused on victory. Together, they fought through the alien defenses and reached the heart of the command center. The destruction of the command center was swift and decisive. The alien forces, without leadership or coordination, began to falter. Earth's military seized the opportunity and launched a final strike, obliterating the remaining alien fleet. The war was over. Earth had won. As the dust settled, the battlefield lay silent, but humanity's victory echoed across the stars. The aliens had underestimated Earth's will to survive, and in the end, it was that will that had triumphed. The alien weapon, once thought to be unstoppable, had been outsmarted and defeated. Humanity had adapted, overcome its fears, and emerged stronger than ever before. But the victory came at a price. Thousands of soldiers had given their lives to secure Earth's freedom, yet their sacrifice had not been in vain. Earth had proven that no weapon, no matter how advanced, could break the spirit of humanity. The war was over, but the lessons learned would carry humanity forward. They had faced the impossible and won, and in that victory, humanity had taken its first steps into a new era, one where they would never be easily defeated again. Victory at last. The final blow had been struck, and the alien forces lay broken. The war that had raged for so long had finally come to an end. The alien weapon, once the most feared tool of destruction, had been defeated. Earth's soldiers, who had once been paralyzed by its terrifying power, now stood triumphant, having outsmarted and overcome the alien threat. But while the victory was monumental, the cost was high, and the consequences of the war would be felt for generations to come. The aftermath of the battle was a scene of both celebration and solemn reflection. The alien fleet had been scattered, their command center obliterated, and their forces left in disarray. The surviving alien soldiers retreated, their confidence shattered. The once mighty empire that had thought to crush humanity had been defeated by a species they had underestimated, a species that, in the face of overwhelming odds, had refused to give up. As Earth's military forces secured the last of the alien strongholds, the soldiers took a moment to reflect on what they had achieved. The victory was sweet, but it was tempered by the immense sacrifices that had been made. Thousands of lives had been lost in the battle for survival. Soldiers who had given everything to protect their home, their families, their world. Their courage had been the cornerstone of humanity's success. The battle might have been won, but their absence would be felt for years to come. In the command center, Dr. Elisa Miller and the other scientists who had helped develop the countermeasures stood side by side with the military leaders. They had worked together for months, building the strategies and technology that had turned the tide of the war. They had learned that no weapon, no matter how advanced, could break the human spirit. Fear could be a weapon, but it could also be overcome. "We did it," Dr. Miller said, her voice filled with a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Humanity has shown that we can adapt, that we can overcome the impossible." General Maxwell, the commander of Earth's forces, nodded. "This victory isn't just about beating the aliens. It's about showing the world, and the universe, that we're not going to back down, no matter the cost." The soldiers, many of whom were still recovering from the mental and physical toll of the battle, gathered together in their units. They shared stories, clapped each other on the back, and exchanged knowing glances. They had been through hell, but they had come out stronger. They had faced their deepest fears and emerged victorious. And now, they would honor the fallen, those who had made the ultimate sacrifice for their world. As the world's leaders prepared to make announcements to the global population, Earth's military began the task of securing the peace. The alien warships that had once dominated the skies were now in pieces, floating in space. The alien forces had been completely incapacitated, and it was clear that they would not return in the foreseeable future. The remaining alien survivors were left with no choice but to retreat to the far reaches of the galaxy, their empire shattered, their dreams of conquest dashed. But even in victory, there was no time for complacency. Humanity now faced the challenge of rebuilding. The scars of war were deep, and the global population had been forever changed. The military and civilian sectors would need to work together to heal the wounds of the conflict. It would take time, but humanity had proven that it could recover from even the most devastating of wars. The resilience that had carried them through the battle would now carry them through the rebuilding process. While Earth celebrated its victory, there was also an understanding that the universe was vast, and other threats might one day emerge. Humanity had won this battle, but they knew that survival required constant vigilance. The war with the aliens was over, but the lessons learned would resonate throughout history. They had faced an enemy that had designed weapons to exploit their weaknesses, but humanity had fought back with ingenuity, unity, and an unbreakable will to survive. In the years to come, Earth would rebuild and prosper. The military forces that had been forged in the fires of battle would remain vigilant, always prepared for the possibility of future threats. But the scars of war would fade, and Earth would flourish once again. The victory over the aliens would go down in history as a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a story of survival, resilience, and triumph against all odds. The message was clear: humanity would never be so easily defeated again. The aftermath. The war was over. Earth had triumphed against the alien invaders, and the threat that had once seemed insurmountable had been eradicated. But the journey to this victory had left its mark on humanity. The scars of battle were not just physical, they were emotional, psychological, and deeply embedded in the memories of those who had fought and lost so much. The alien threat had been wiped from Earth's doorstep, but the soldiers who returned from the front lines were forever changed. Many had seen comrades fall in the heat of battle, and the weight of those losses would stay with them forever. However, there was also a sense of relief, a deep, shared understanding that humanity had faced the worst and come out victorious. The first few weeks after the victory were filled with chaotic celebrations. Streets in cities across the world were flooded with people, their cheers echoing through the air, knowing that their home, their families, and their way of life had been saved. The sense of unity was palpable. For the first time in generations, people from all corners of the globe were united by a single purpose: survival. The war had been brutal, but in the aftermath, it brought humanity together in a way nothing else ever had. But while the celebrations continued, there were also quieter moments of reflection. Soldiers who had returned home struggled to reintegrate into civilian life. The psychological toll of the war, the battles they had fought in their minds as much as on the battlefield, would take years to heal. Counselors, support groups, and mental health professionals were now in high demand. Earth's government, which had pulled together resources for the war effort, now turned its attention to the long-term recovery of its people. The next challenge was rebuilding. Cities and regions that had been devastated by the alien attacks had to be restored. Technology that had once been on the edge of science fiction was now a reality, but with it came the task of ensuring it was used responsibly. The scientists, military leaders, and engineers who had developed the countermeasures against the alien weapon were now tasked with advancing this technology for peaceful purposes: medicine, infrastructure, and the future of space exploration. Dr. Elisa Miller, who had been at the forefront of the resistance effort, found herself in a new role. As the war hero who had helped design the very weapons of humanity's victory, she now turned her focus to the future. "We've learned that fear is not the end of us," she said in her first public speech after the war. "It is not something to be overcome in isolation. It is something we must understand, control, and use to propel ourselves forward. We have seen what happens when we confront our darkest fears. We can, and we will, thrive because of it." But not all was peaceful. The alien survivors, though beaten, still remained a threat in distant corners of the galaxy. Humanity's victory had sent ripples throughout the universe. Word of their resistance and resilience spread far and wide. It was clear that Earth had proven itself a formidable force, one that was no longer easily ignored. The future would bring new challenges, but Earth was no longer the fragile species it had once been. The war had forged an indomitable spirit, and no matter what came next, Earth would face it as one. In the years following the victory, Earth expanded its efforts into space exploration. They sent new missions to the stars, to distant worlds that had once seemed out of reach. The technology developed to fight the aliens became the foundation of a new golden age for humanity. The legacy of the war was not just one of survival. It was a reminder that humanity had the potential to reach beyond its own limitations and thrive. Meanwhile, humanity's military forces remained vigilant. Earth's soldiers, no longer just defenders, had now become guardians of peace. They were prepared for anything, their minds and bodies forged in the fires of war. Every soldier knew that the fight against fear was not over. The aliens had been driven back, but the universe was vast, and there would always be new threats. But one thing was certain: humanity was ready. They had survived the worst, and they would never be so easily defeated again. And so, the story of Earth's struggle against the alien forces became more than a tale of war. It was a story of survival, of resilience, and of triumph. It became a story passed down from generation to generation, a reminder of what could be achieved when humanity stood together. The greatest lesson had been learned. Fear was a powerful force, but it was not undefeatable. And in the face of the greatest terror the world had ever known, humanity had not only survived, they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before.